Now, detonate the reality bomb!
I will build a great, great wall.
Some alien race to come down and threaten us.
Is the singularity near?
The truth is out there.
The military-industrial complex.
The 7 mountains of the influencers of culture.
To be as gods, you know.
Change has come to America.
Catapult of propaganda.
From a secure location on top of the ridge in the heart of the beautiful Missouri Ozarks, this is A View from the Bunker. Now, here's Derek Gilbert.
This is the biggest development in American politics since the Watergate break-in in 1972. Welcome to A View from the Bunker. I'm Derek Gilbert. Thank you for listening, whether you're listening at Spreaker, at vftb.net, at Stitcher.com, or if you're watching on the YouTube channel, youtube.com/Derek Gilbert. Appreciate you inviting me into your eye or ear holes or some combination thereof. We're going to talk this week, or rather about the week in politics that just was. Of course, this was the week of the State of the Union address, Donald Trump's first ever. And of course, the week that the memo prepared by members of the Republican members of the House Permanent Subcommittee on Intelligence, or the House Intelligence Committee for short, and why that is such a big deal. There is a lot to cover. We'll try to do it quickly and briefly because you can get bogged down in details. There are some very basic things that I think summarize it, and I'll do my best to make it as plain as possible in plain English. But again, the bottom line being that this is bigger than Watergate. Not that you'd know it from watching or listening to the mainstream media. So let's start with the event Tuesday night, the show in the U.S. Capitol, which of course was Donald Trump's State of the Union address. In my opinion, best speech of Donald Trump's life. Now, Mr. Trump is not by nature a gifted speech maker. He is not a polished orator, but I think that's part of his appeal out here in the heartland. We are sick to death of polished orators. Not that George W. Bush was, but certainly Barack Obama was. Bill Clinton before him certainly was. But we've had our fill of politicians who say a lot, rather use a lot of words without really saying anything. Donald Trump is the kind of guy who kind of, not exactly eloquent, but says a lot with those few words that he manages to get out. Now, his delivery was not the Donald Trump that we often see off the cuff, extemporaneous, sometimes sticking his foot in his mouth, but it was a measured delivery. Donald Trump off the teleprompter, and at an hour and 20 minutes, maybe a little longer than it needed to be, only 9 minutes shorter than the longest State of the Union address, which not surprisingly was held by Bill Clinton. The mainstream press, of course, hated it, called it divisive, corrosive, racist, to some commentators. But you kind of expected that. But once again, this illustrates the divide between the political class in the United States and their allies in the media, and what we real Americans think about President Trump and his policies. CNN's poll of actual Americans who watched the speech, and I realize this is not let's be honest. People who watched the State of the Union address kind of pre-selected in favor of Republicans. If I had to guess, I would bet that that's true. I mean, if you hate Donald Trump, you're probably not going to torture yourself for an hour, hour and a half sitting in front of a television waiting to get angry. Now, I've done that in the past with certain States of the Union addresses, but, you're probably not as strange a bird as I am. Anyway, so right there, you may have a bit of a bias, but even with that, the fact that CNN's poll of people who watched the State of the Union showed 48% with a very positive response, and 22% reported a somewhat positive response. That's 70% who either liked it a bit or liked it a lot. 70% of Americans with a favorable response to the State of the Union address that the pundits hated. Where's the disconnect there? And remember, this was CNN's poll. This wasn't Fox News viewers. This was CNN. The CBS News poll was actually higher, showed 75% of respondents reporting a positive response. Again, this was exactly the opposite of what you would expect if you had not listened to the speech and only listened to the pundits afterward. Where is the disconnect? Well, it's because 90% of the press, especially in the nation's capital, voted for Hillary Clinton. So anyway, it was a speech that focused very much on the idea of America first. The first hour of Trump's speech, out of the hour and 20 minutes, was devoted entirely to domestic policy. Didn't talk about foreign policy at all. Talked about tax cuts, trade and trade agreements, the economy. Stock market is up. You've got companies that are moving plants and bringing money that had been stashed overseas back into the country. That's a big deal. Apple in particular, which has the largest stash of cash of any corporation on the planet, bringing its money back into the United States, paying a tax penalty for, a tax bill for bringing the money back into the U.S., but a much lower tax bill than it would have been before the tax package that was passed by Congress just a couple of months ago. Regulatory cuts, and of course he talked about immigration, which is one of the reasons that Democrats and people in the media, but I repeat myself, were so down on the State of the Union address. President Trump laid out a common sense plan for immigration. Let's be honest. You got a lot of people who were brought into the United States as children against their will. They don't know anything about their home country anymore, or very little anyway. Is sending them home really fair? Well, maybe not, but let's not just give citizenship away as though there's no value to it. The president laid out a plan that he's offering to the Democrats as a compromise on the immigration deal, as long as they agree to end chain migration. And that was apparently a trigger word for some in the media. I actually heard Senator Dick Durbin of Illinois say that chain migration conjures images of Africans being brought to America in chains, as though this were still 1840. Really? That thought never crossed my mind at all, but then I guess I know what he would call me. Anyway, an end to chain migration and funding for the border wall on the Mexican border. Statistics, by the way, from the city of El Paso regarding drug arrests and violent crime show that walls do work. So the president said in exchange for that, he would be willing to offer a 12-year path to citizenship for so-called dreamers, these children who are now in their late 20s, early 30s, brought into the country by their parents who entered the country illegally. But they would need to meet certain education requirements, and there would be a low-tolerance policy toward breaking the law. They would have to show good moral character. In other words, at the end of 12 years, if they met these requirements, were hardworking, met certain education requirements, didn't break the law, the kind of people we would want in the country, then they could become citizens. And you know what? When you make somebody work for something, they tend to value it a little more, which means that 12 years from now, assuming this plan is somehow agreed upon, when Democrats are still arguing for open migration and the immigration lottery, let's just give away citizenship green cards to, by random chance. These people who today are, dreamers might be a little less open to letting other people get in so easily. And I think Democrats know that. And I think that's why they are fighting so hard to prevent that and the border wall. Here's what's going on. The Democrats have staked their future on identity politics, on racial identity, on sexual identity. And so they require a steady stream of new immigrants across the border. Why? Because the longer people are in the country, each successive generation from the one that originally arrived here, tend to identify more as a citizen of that new country and less as a citizen of the old country. Case in point, me. On my mother's side, I'm third generation born in this country. Grandfather was born in South Dakota, mother North Dakota, me in Chicago. But my great-grandfather emigrated from what is now Moldova, German, but had emigrated to what was then part of Russia under Catherine the Great. So great-grandpa came over, couldn't speak English. Grandpa went to school as a child not speaking English, but my mother never learned to speak German. I don't speak German. I know next to nothing about Germany, do not identify as a German citizen, and certainly my daughter doesn't either. That's what's going to happen to these dreamers. 2 and 3 generations down the road, they will become more and more conservative in their politics if trends hold, if any comparison to previous generations. On my father's side, the same thing. I mean, some branches of my father's family tree, we've been here since the 1620s, came over as indentured servants, but but the family surname, which actually was Gilberg, Swedish, we've only been here for about 140 years. Again, my grandfather, first generation, born here instead of in the old country. My dad and me. I don't speak Swedish, don't identify as a Swede. So that's likely to happen with these children who were brought here from places like Guatemala, El Salvador, and so forth. 2 and 3 generations down the road, they're going to be more conservative. Democrats know this. They've got to keep bringing more illegals into the country, more immigrants into the country, whether they're illegal or not. So let me qualify that a bit. They're not pushing necessarily for illegal immigration, just more immigration, because without that, frankly, the Democratic Party is going to die. And did you notice during the State of the Union speech when President Trump stole the left's meme, the way he did that by saying Americans are dreamers too? Ooh, you could hear heads explode from 1,000 miles away. Trigger warning. A lot of what President Trump did on Tuesday night was intended to bait Democrats. And it worked because there was a lot of stagecraft. And we'll talk about that for a bit, because the stagecraft, you say, regardless of what you think about President Trump and his ability to deliver a speech, or even if you just hate his policies, you got to admit the stagecraft on Tuesday night was excellent. The guests that they brought there, the Immigrations and Customs enforcement agent who's responsible for chasing down and arresting members of that the vicious gang MS-13, parents who'd lost daughters to that gang. Powerful images, and especially because those parents, those 4 people from New York, African Americans, and when the crowd stood to honor them and mourn their loss, not only did Democrats sit and stay sitting on their hands, but the Congressional Black Caucus did as well. Democrats were baited into making themselves look like they were not just opposed to Donald Trump, but also opposed to news of African American employment. Unemployment in the United States among African Americans is at an all-time low. But the Democrats would not bring themselves, forget about standing. They couldn't even bring themselves to applaud for that. Powerful optics. And believe me, there are those in the African American community who will notice that, and that will register. The Albuquerque police officer and his wife, who adopted the child of a homeless heroin addict. And I think the most powerful image of the night was the defector from North Korea, Ji Song-ho, who lost a leg in an accident, collapsed from hunger on a train track, and a train ran over, basically shattered his leg, had to be amputated, escaped, defected after meeting Christians in China, and then walked hundreds of miles to freedom through China on crutches, and now lives in Seoul, South Korea, and works with defectors from the North. But seeing that young man stand and hold those crutches up as a symbol of the adversity that he's overcome was a powerful, powerful symbol. But again, you didn't see the Democrats stand or even applaud. So the president really, it was a speech that seems to have been written specifically to bait them into looking bad. And it worked. And in fact, at one point, as the president described the United States Capitol as a monument to the American people, and Republican lawmakers spontaneously began chanting, USA, USA, USA. Congressman Luis Gutierrez of Chicago, in fact, the west side of Chicago, very close to where I grew up, stormed out. You could see him on the video, just walking out in the middle of the State of the Union address, apparently triggered by the chants of USA, USA. And later on, when he was interviewed on one of the cable channels, Gutierrez made a comment, clever, said that whoever translated the president's speech from the original Russian did a pretty good job. They're still beating that Russia collusion drum. Well, people out here in the heartland aren't buying that anymore. With each passing day, this whole idea of Russia influencing President Trump in the campaign looks more and more ridiculous. And so it's that kind of attitude, Representative Gutierrez, that's going to absolutely destroy the Democratic Party out here in the heartland. And the world does not revolve around the west side of Chicago. So what was not said, what was not addressed during the State of the Union address? Well, first of all, the debt, the federal debt, which official numbers show at about, $20 or $22 trillion. That's actually only if you calculate the debt using accounting methods that would get most corporations, accountants, corporate accountants sent to jail. The actual federal debt, when you count future obligations, is like 70 trillion, on the high side of 70 trillion. So, yes, while the United States does need an investment in infrastructure to repair roads, upgrade our electric grid, repair crumbling locks and dams, $1.5 trillion seems like a reasonable investment, but who pays for it? President Trump doesn't seem to be worried by the deficit, the federal deficit. At some point, that's going to have to be paid by somebody. So that was not mentioned in the speech, although I will say that unlike past State of the Union addresses, when Sharon and I would just sit in front of the television and go cha-ching, cha-ching, every time we'd hear another promise by George W. Bush or Barack Obama or Bill Clinton, we didn't hear as much of that, but still a $1.5 trillion infrastructure package, even if they get private investment to kind of offset some of the cost, that's a lot of money. And we're already running deficits. The money has to come from somewhere. So that was a little disappointing not to hear anything about that. And the other thing, of course, was the ongoing Russia investigation, Special Counsel Robert Mueller. But why would the president bring that up? I mean, if he's the subject of the investigation, would it even be appropriate for him to bring it up at the State of the Union address? Tom Brokaw of NBC was really obsessed with this, pointed out that Robert Mueller is not present in the gallery, as if Mueller would get an invite. Please. And besides, there was going to be plenty of talk about Russia later in the week anyway, and we'll get to that in just a couple of minutes. So the Democratic response, touch on that for just a moment. Actually, there were 5 Democratic responses, which is kind of unusual. Normally, the opposition party presents one response, somebody tasked with presenting the official opposition party response to the State of the Union. A few years ago, the Republicans put up 2, as Paul Ryan gave the official Republican response, but Congresswoman Michelle Bachmann of Minnesota delivered the Tea Party response. And pundits were like, whoa, this is really strange. It shows a schism in the Republican Party. This is a confusing message. Who's really driving this bus anyway? Not a peep about the fact that 5 different congressional lawmakers, or Democratic lawmakers, gave responses. The official response, the one that was televised, was given by Joseph Kennedy III, Joe Kennedy III, who spoke at a what appeared to be a trade college or technical college of some sort, an automotive shop. It really was unremarkable. His message could be boiled down to this: we Democrats are for everything Donald Trump just said, except we don't want any national borders or borders between genders. No borders. No nations, no genders. And that's basically what the Democrats are running on in 2018. More immigrants and more freedom for people to choose to use whatever bathroom or locker room they say they feel like using on any given day. And I'm sorry, but most Americans are not okay with either one of those policies. The Democrats have been painted into a corner. And unless the economy tanks in a major way over the next 12 months, the Democrats could wind up losing seats in the midterm election, which is really unusual. Really unusual. The midterm election for a new president, usually the opposition party picks up a bunch of seats. The opposite could happen this time. And I think this is really funny because on election night, as it became obvious that Donald Trump was actually going to win this thing, pundits were saying, the Republican Party's destroyed. I don't see how they survived this. Here we are 1 year in, and what it appears to me that exactly the opposite's happening. The Democrats are on the run. In fact, the Democrats are on the verge of being broke. Debbie Wasserman Schultz has left the party in a real mess, and Democrats are not fundraising. They are not raising funds anywhere. They're not in the same league as the Republican Party right now. Now, not that I'm taking any joy in this. I'm not a Republican per se. I am a Christian. My first, citizenship, my primary citizenship is in the kingdom of God. But just looking at what's going on here in the world in which we live, this physical realm, what the experts, the so-called experts, the major media, which has been wrong about everything connected to Donald Trump for the last 18 months, what they were saying a year ago is that the Republican Party is doomed. They won't survive Donald Trump. He's going to destroy the party. And it appears to be the Democrats who are imploding. And again, this bit of stagecraft showmanship on Tuesday night, where the cameras kept showing these very glum, stone-faced Democrats sitting on their hands for things that most Americans were, hey, yeah, tax cuts, good. More jobs, good. Companies moving their plants back to the United States, that's good. African-American, Latin American jobs, good. But not if you're a Democrat, apparently. And sadly, Joe Kennedy whoever wrote the speech for him really didn't have much in there except for a few touch points that they hit to highlight a few differences on social issues, and mainly immigration and gender identity issues. That's kind of a weak platform to run on with most Americans. I'm sorry, even in this enlightened 21st century, most Americans, especially out here in the heartland, not ready to send their children to a school that's allowing kids of the other gender to use the same bathroom and locker room. Maybe that's closed-minded of me, but that's just the way it is. The other thing, too, and again, this gets to showmanship, which I know is not substance, but appearances count. Don't know what was going on with his chapstick, but the way he was lit and the makeup that Joe Kennedy III had on was made it look like he was drooling. I mean, I'm not going to mock him for it. It was unfortunate because that's what people are going to take away and remember about his response. The other thing, too, and I think this says something about the desperation of the Democratic Party in this age of inclusion, gender equality. The best the Democrats could come up with is turning back to the rich white scion of one of the most privileged families in the Western Hemisphere. That's who's carrying their torch. Yeah, Democrats are in disarray. So anyway, that's the assessment. Again, I think the president's State of the Union address was a winner. Not that you'd know it from the major media, but again, the major media is the mouthpiece of the deep state, representing both Republicans and Democrats who don't want the apple cart, the status quo, overturned. Now, what about this memo? On Friday, this was a big deal. The memo prepared by Republican members of the House Permanent Subcommittee on Intelligence, or the House Intelligence Committee. Trey Gowdy and Chairman Devin Nunes in particular responsible for putting this together. This summarizes information, evidence that they have been privy to regarding the abuse of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act by the FBI, specifically as it related to surveillance of the Trump campaign. And in a nutshell, what the memo reveals, assuming that Gowdy, Nunez, and the Republicans on this committee didn't twist things, and based on what I've seen from analyses elsewhere, testimony before Senate subcommittees that have been recorded by C-SPAN and so forth, I don't think they did. This is also corroborated to a degree by a 99-page opinion issued by the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court in April of 2017 that documents the FBI's abuses of the NSA's surveillance capabilities. The memo that was released on Friday, unredacted by the House Intelligence Committee with the approval of President Trump, shows that the Department of Justice and FBI used information bought and paid for by the Democratic National Committee and Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign to get a warrant from the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court to conduct surveillance, electronic surveillance, on a gentleman named Carter Page. Page was a volunteer, a low-level volunteer with the Trump campaign who had traveled to Russia a couple of times. And so in October of 2016, the DOJ and FBI got approval from the FISA court to conduct surveillance on Page. What the FBI and DOJ knew but did not tell the FISA court is that the information they used to justify the application, the information they used in the application for the warrant, was opposition research bought and paid for by the DNC and by the Hillary Clinton campaign. These applications presented to the FISA court have as a protection a 90-day sunset clause. Basically, 90 days is the length of time that these FISA warrants are valid. So they have to be renewed every 90 days. In other words, the FBI or whatever agency wants to conduct surveillance has to go back to the FISA court if they want to continue watching a particular individual and show cause to the court. This is what we think this guy is up to. This is what we hope to find. And this is why we want you to give us permission to continue spying on him. So they had an initial application in October of 2016, 3 renewals. So 4 90-day, basically they spied on Carter Page for a year with the permission of the FISA court. On none of those 4 applications, the initial application or the 3 renewals, did they tell the FISA court the source of the dossier that they used to justify asking for the warrant. This is the so-called Steele dossier prepared by Christopher Steele, former MI6 operative, British spy basically, who was working for a private contractor called Fusion GPS. Fusion GPS had been hired by the DNC and Hillary's campaign to dig up dirt on Donald Trump. They paid Christopher Steele over $160,000 for his work. The FBI knew this. The DOJ knew this, but they didn't tell the FISA court. That's relevant information that was withheld from the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court. As part of the application, the FBI submitted to the FISA court an article by investigative reporter Michael Isikoff, published by Yahoo News. Isikoff is a veteran reporter, credible reporter, does his research. Isikoff's article published September 23rd of 2016 about Carter Page's trip to Russia was used to corroborate the evidence in the dossier prepared by Christopher Steele. Steele has admitted in British court filings that he met with Yahoo News and Michael Isikoff at the direction of Fusion GPS. Fusion GPS put Steele in touch with Isikoff and Yahoo News. So Steele was the source of the information in Isikoff's story, the story that was used to corroborate Steele's dossier. Do you see how ridiculous that is? Steele's dossier presented to the FISA court. This is why we need to spy on Carter Page. Oh, and in case you're worried about the veracity of the evidence in the dossier, here's a news article by a reputable journalist, Michael Isikoff, from a couple of weeks ago, showing that Carter Page did in fact travel to Russia. But again, the source of the information in the article was the guy who wrote the dossier the article was corroborating. And again, the FBI didn't tell the FISA court. So there's more to it in the memo, but that is pretty much it in a nutshell. In September of 2016, Steele, the MI6 agent, also told then Associate Deputy Attorney General Bruce Orr, a high-ranking official in the Department of Justice, that he, quote, was desperate that Donald Trump not get elected and was passionate about him not being president, end quote. Again, clear evidence of bias relevant to the application for the warrant before the FISA court, but information withheld from the FISA court. And at the time that Orr met with Steele and noted Steele's bias, Orr's wife, Nellie Orr, was working for Fusion GPS, the company that had contracted Steele to put together the dossier that was used for the warrant. So it's what you have is a picture here of the Federal Bureau of Investigation taking mud, political mud, the kind of mud that the candidates sling back and forth at each other in political ads, and using that, knowing that it had been paid for by the Democratic Party to get a warrant to spy on the Republican Party's candidate for president. That is a gross abuse of its power and should not be tolerated regardless of which party sits in the White House. This is a much bigger deal than Watergate. In Watergate, 1972, the Republican Party sent 5 guys over to the Watergate Hotel in Washington, broke into Democratic National Committee headquarters looking for dirt, especially on Daniel Ellsberg, the guy who leaked the Pentagon Papers to the New York Times and caused a scandal. Pentagon hadn't been quite honest with the American people about what was going on in Vietnam. So Republicans, angry about that, wanted to smear him and sent these guys over to get information from the DNC. Here we've got the FBI using the surveillance capabilities of the NSA to collect information against the Republican Party's presidential nominee. And then after the election, if reports are accurate, the deputy director of the FBI, Andrew McCabe, who stepped down, you can see the air quotes, earlier this week, 2 months shy of his retirement, called a meeting, an invitation-only meeting of high-ranking officials within the FBI and the Department of Justice to try to come up with a plan to hamstring Donald Trump. And according to someone who was there, unnamed source, so I can't corroborate this, but I'm passing it on, unnamed source, McCabe's exact words were, F. Flynn, that was the nominee for National Security Advisor General Michael Flynn, and then we F. Trump. Now look, when you work in government, of course you're going to have an opinion about the people you're working for, but if you're working in the Department of Justice and you are holding meetings of people inside the agency to discuss ways to circumvent the wishes of the American people and our duly elected representatives, that is sedition. That's serious business. And that's what we're talking about here. Because the FBI, the NSA, Department of Justice, if they can wield this kind of power against a guy like Donald Trump, one of the wealthiest and now most powerful men in the Western Hemisphere, they can do it to you and me. But the main difference is when they do it to you and me, no one's ever going to hear about it because, who are we? We don't have any kind of clout. This is the kind of thing that the men who met in Philadelphia in 1776 and drew up a Declaration of Independence wanted to get away from, fought a war to put a stop to. Unlawful search and seizure. It's why when they drafted the Constitution, they decentralized authority, wanted the authority held with the states instead of in a central government, a powerful central government. That ship may have already sailed, but that's what we're talking about here. Now, there's another aspect of this story that's really intriguing, and I never thought I would say this, but it appears that one of the heroes in this whole story over the last 2 years is the director of the NSA, Vice Admiral Mike Rogers. Admiral Mike Rogers was made aware in early 2016 that there were a series of ongoing and intentional violations of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, FISA. Specifically, item number 17, which includes unauthorized collection of upstream data against U.S. individuals. These are called about queries. Section 702 of the FISA, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, governs what kind of information can be shared around inside the intelligence community. Section 16 is are to from queries, who sent it, who received it. Item 17 under Section 702 are called about queries, the collection of emails and phone call surveillance, what was actually contained in those messages. And in early 2016, Rogers was made aware of violations, irregular requests for this 702 item 17. This about query, this about information. And so in the middle of 2016, around the summer of 2016, Rogers ordered the NSA compliance officer to conduct a full audit on Section 702 compliance. The compliance officer came back in October 20th of 2016, and told Admiral Rogers, director of the NSA, that there were violations of the Fourth Amendment being conducted, or that were taking place with other agencies in the government making use of this information collected by the NSA. And specifically, we find out later, because of this 99-page opinion issued by the FISA court in April of 2017, that these violations were taking place through the FBI. The FBI specifically was sharing information about American citizens with unauthorized individuals, specifically contractors. They were sharing information with areas within the FBI's bureaucracy staffed by private contractors. We don't know specifically who they were, but I wouldn't be surprised if Fusion GPS turned out to be one of those. So anyway, Admiral Rogers was briefed by the compliance officer October 20th of 2016. Now, bear in mind, this is just after the FBI got its FISA warrant. They were aware, by the way, the FBI, that Admiral Rogers was looking into how the NSA's data was being used. And this was also just a couple of weeks before the presidential election, the first Tuesday in November of 2016. So on October 26th, 6 days after he's briefed by the compliance officer, NSA Director Mike Rogers informed the FISA court of the Section 702 violations. And he immediately put a stop to about query requests immediately. Now, the election takes place about a week or so after the FISA court is briefed by Admiral Rogers. To everyone's shock and surprise, Donald Trump defeated Hillary Clinton. All of the people in the Department of Justice and FBI who thought that all of this would be swept under the rug when Hillary Clinton took office, suddenly now scrambling because, OMG, the Donald is going to be in the Oval Office come January 20th. Well, 10 days after the election, Admiral Rogers traveled to Trump Tower in New York. He traveled from Washington, D.C. to Trump Tower without telling his boss, the Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper. He briefs Donald Trump on something. We don't know specifically what was said, but we can guess, because the very next day, November 18th of 2016, the Trump transition team, which had set up shop in Trump Tower, packed everything up and moved lock, stock, and barrel to the Trump golf course at Bedminster, New Jersey, where they conducted the interviews for cabinet positions and did their business while Trump Tower, according to former federal prosecutor Joe DiGenova, while Trump Tower was being debugged. So it's possible Admiral Rogers, director of the NSA, went to Trump Tower without telling his boss to brief Donald Trump and say, you know, you might want to move because you're being spied on. Because Admiral Rogers knew about this, of course, through the audit that had been taking place earlier in 2016. Not coincidentally. Now, remember, the briefing with Donald Trump took place November 17th. They moved November 18th. The Washington Post reports on November the 19th of 2016. Pentagon and intelligence community chiefs have urged Obama to remove the head of the NSA. What? Yeah. Mike Rogers goes to New York without telling his boss, the director of national intelligence, briefs Donald Trump. Trump and his team pack up and move to Bedminster, New Jersey on the 18th. On the 19th, the Washington Post is fed the story that the heads of the Pentagon and the nation's intelligence community have recommended to President Obama that the director of the National Security Agency, Admiral Michael S. Rogers, be removed. Now, they post-date the story. They say the recommendation was delivered to the White House last month by Defense Secretary Ashton B. Carter and Director of National Intelligence James R. Clapper, Jr. Coincidence, though, that this story was held until the day after Trump moved out of range of the FBI bugs. I'm not much of a coincidence theorist. Bizarre. But that's what's going on. The Obama intelligence agencies were spying on the opposition party. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. The Department of Justice has been exceeding its authority, especially under the Obama administration, for several years now. In fact, that was the cause of the 99-page opinion released by the FISA court in April of 2017. Basically said that after President Obama loosened privacy rules in 2011, the FBI began abusing its power and abusing the information collected by the NSA. You don't hear the media talk about this, not often anyway. I had never heard about this 99-page. This was a story broken by Circa.com, CIRCA. Sarah Carter, a reporter that if you watch Fox News, especially Hannity lately, you'll have seen Sarah Carter quite a bit. She's been doing great work in breaking these stories. And, I'm just late to the party and catching up on all of this. But this is not a partisan news agency or commentator making the point that the intelligence agencies under the Obama administration were conducting illegal searches on Americans throughout most of Obama's time in office. This was the FISA court. This is the secret court created by the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act to govern wiretapping, spying, surveillance on American citizens. They're the ones who said this. And if you do some searching, InfoWars has a copy of this, but you can find it a lot of places. This 99-page opinion issued by the FISA court last April documents abuses of power by the FBI and the unauthorized, illegal sharing of information collected by the NSA with people who should not have seen it. And that is the kind of thing that was happening here with Fusion GPS, Michael Steele, the former MI6 agent, and the FBI trying to put together some legal cover to continue its surveillance of the Trump campaign after Admiral Rogers had shut down this type of Section 702, Item 17, about information, about queries. So this is a bigger deal than Watergate. This is a bigger deal than Watergate. Our Fourth Amendment protections under the Constitution out the window during the Obama administration. But if you've been a listener to View from the Bunker or PID Radio for any length of time, if you listen to my old radio show back in 2006, 2007, the secular radio show I did in Columbia, Missouri, even when there was a Republican in the White House, I was speaking out against stuff like this. This is the kind of thing the framers of the Constitution, the authors, the signers of the Declaration of Independence were willing to go to war for, to put a stop to. And here in 21st century America, well, it's a new day. The post 9/11 world, we need to. If you're not doing anything wrong, you have nothing to hide, right? Yeah. And why then do you have curtains on your living room windows? Anyway, so that's the week that was in the week of politics. Now, as Christians, how do we process this? Again, it's easy to get angry about stuff like this. I would suggest that we remember that we are citizens of a kingdom first and a republic second. Let's not get caught up in the partisan politics here. Who's winning, Republicans or Democrats? Yeah, we have to make the best home we can here in the United States. So let's let our elected representatives know how we feel about this. I like the idea of a Fourth Amendment, that government, law enforcement should have to go to a judge and give the judge a specific reason for why they want to look through my stuff before they can look through my stuff. The way things are set up right now, the NSA is scooping up everything. But God bless Admiral Mike Rogers for recognizing that that was being abused and trying to put a stop to it. And then briefing Donald Trump on this before he got deep into his discussions with and interviews with the potential cabinet secretaries. Anyway, I'm sure we'll have more to say on this in the days ahead. In fact, Sharon and I will do a program on this on PID Radio this weekend. If you've not heard PID Radio, check that out, pidradio.com. Coming up on A View from the Bunker next Sunday, filmmaker Trey Smith, has a new video out called The God Dimension. We talk about that. Kind of a wide-ranging conversation, only loosely based around his video, but you'll see that next Sunday, or hear it if you choose to listen. And one of these days, I want to get Sharon to sit down and talk about the Red Wing saga and why she uses fiction to teach spiritual warfare. Hopefully we can do that in the next couple of weeks. So that's kind of the loose schedule ahead. As far as dates that we've got firmly locked in the calendar, March 22nd through the 25th, the Hear the Watchman Conference in Dallas. The Hilton DFW Lakes Conference Center will be the host, will be the site where we will gather a group of watchmen, Sharon and myself, Josh and Christina Peck from Skywatch TV, also Carl Gallups, L.A. Marzulli, Bill Salas, Rabbi Zev Parat, Pastor Paul Begley, Josh Tolley, Pastor Casper McLeod, many others. You'll find more information and at the website, hearthewatchman.com, and we can save 20% off the $20 rather off the registration. Save $20 on the registration at hearthewatchman.com with the promo code Gilbert20. That's Gilbert20. And then if you want to watch the video instead, if you can't travel to Dallas, get the video package. It's only $49. You can watch the videos for 6 months after the conference and save 20% off the video package with the promo code Gilbert20. The other conference we've got on the books for 2018, the True Legends Conference, coming back to Branson, Missouri, September 14th through the 16th. It is about the transhumanism and the hybrid age, a topic that is right up our alley. It's coming back to the Mansion Theater in Branson, Missouri. If you were there last year, you know what a great place that was. Comfortable seating, a great facility for a conference like this. Speakers include Steve Quayle, Tom Horn, Sharon K. Gilbert, Timothy Alberino, Dr. Hugo de Garis, one of the world's leading experts in artificial intelligence research, David Knight from Infowars.com. Those are the main speakers. You get more information, and you can register online at gen6.com. That's GENSIX.com. Still got the great package available on the book. The book back there, The Day the Earth Stands Still, co-authored with Josh Peck. Get that through the website, officialdisclosure.com. You'll find a link there to buy the book along with Josh's updated and revised Unraveling the Multiverse, Mike Heiser's 2 novels, The Facade and The Portent, and about $300 worth of product altogether, including some great video interviews that have never been broadcast anywhere. All of that for $39.99 at officialdisclosure.com. Sunday, of course, is when Sharon and I produce our weekly Bible study. We do about a 1 hour verse-by-verse exegesis on as we go through the Bible in chronological order. We're right now in the book of Jeremiah, just getting ready to looking forward to Ezekiel in a couple of weeks. That's going to be fascinating stuff, but we've got archives going all the way back to Genesis 1:1. You'll find those posted usually by midday Sunday at gilberthouse.org. That's gilberthouse.org. Please give A View from the Bunker a review, whether it's at Stitcher, iTunes, Spreaker, or wherever else fine podcasts are sold. And, of course, give us a thumbs up at the YouTube channel, youtube.com/Derek Gilbert. You'll find us at Facebook as well, facebook.com/View from the Bunker. Give us a like over there. And remember, A View from the Bunker is a production of Gilbert House and released under Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial No Derivatives 4.0 International License. The opening theme is by Kevin MacLeod. His website, by the way, incompetech.com. The announcer is DC Good. Remember, we wrestle not against flesh and blood. I'm Derek Gilbert, and this is A View from the Bunker.